When you're being challenged, you're being forced to learn, and then you're just naturally becoming a better engineer. If you're not getting opportunities to interact with new projects and problems and new design constraints, you're not being pushed and you're not growing.
Hi, I'm Larry Guthrie, Director of Content Strategy at the Society of Women Engineers. Welcome to Diverse, a SWE podcast. Today, I'm joined by two women engineers from Resideo Technologies who are in different career stages. Kyra Neal is a mid-career mechanical design engineer, and Helen Meza is a system integration lead engineer with over 20 years of experience. What connects their stories is a shared commitment to curiosity, taking initiative, and working on technologies that have a life or death impact. Thank you to Resideo Technologies for sponsoring this episode. Helen and Kyra, welcome to Diverse.
Hi, thanks for having us.
We are thrilled that you're here. To start, let's hear about your engineering journeys. I'm curious to hear the similarities and the differences between your stories. Kyra, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I grew up surrounded by engineering. My stepdad was a reliability engineer, and I was minutes away from multiple Medtronic campuses. So I had a lot of opportunities to interact with engineering growing up, and it was just very accessible to me always. But it wasn't until high school when I joined my high school robotics team, that I really was captivated by engineering and knew that was what I wanted to do. And the products over time that I've wanted to work on have shifted from time to time. I think it started with wanting to design roller coasters, but I've just kind of always followed that path. In 2018, I graduated from the University of Minnesota with my degree in mechanical engineering and joined Stratasys as an intern and then eventually a full-time design engineer. And there I was working on designing 3D printers and just developing that base skill set a mechanical engineer needs, working with product development, making sure parts were manufacturable, and cross-functional collaborations, developing all of those skills. After about 6.5 years of doing that, I started to realize that I wasn't being as challenged anymore in that environment and started looking for new opportunities to continue pushing my boundaries and learning. And that's what led me here to now Resideo. I'm working on consumer products instead of industrial machines, but I get to still apply a lot of what I've learned at Stratasys to the products I'm working on now.
Yeah, it sounds like everything kind of builds, even if you're jumping from different areas of engineering or different companies. That same skill set you can kind of carry with you, and those kind of learnings you take with you. And Helen?
Yes. Hi, Larry. I am very excited to be here and to have the opportunity to collaborate with the Society of Women Engineers. I find the work you do very inspiring, especially in the way you empower women professionally and also in the well-being and health areas. So thank you so much for having me.
We are very happy that you're with us today.
To answer your question about my engineering journey, I would say for me, my engineering journey started in South America. Back in the 1980s, I grew up in the second largest city in Peru. And at that time, the country's economy was not so great. The country was facing challenges due to high unemployment and inflation. So my parents had a vision for their 4 children to study in the US, and I shared that vision with them. So at that time in the 80s, my goal was to be financially independent and not to be a burden to my parents. So you can imagine back then, my 15-year-old naive brain thought I only had 3 options to be financially independent. One was medical school, second, law school, and third, engineering. So choice number 1 was immediately out the door because I feel so squeamish about blood. Second choice, law school. I thought I could do that. That sounds really good. I can memorize large pieces of content. And then I thought, what about courtroom? I have a tremendous fear of public speaking. And I still do to a lesser extent. So scratch choice number 2.
And we won't consider this public speaking. This is just a little conversation between the two of us.
Yeah. So by process of elimination, engineering school was the least scary for me. Together with the support of my parents, I took the plunge, jumped across the ocean, and started my electrical engineering degree in upstate New York.
That was a big move. You made the move by yourself?
Yes, I did. I made the move all by myself to a different country where I really didn't know the language that well. And needless to say, it was a huge culture shock for me at first.
I can imagine. It took some courage. You had to be brave to do that. I think just anybody just going off to college by themselves is an act of bravery. You're leaving your parents, but to do that in a completely different country where you're actually learning the language on the fly as well is even more impressive and I'm sure daunting on your part.
It was, but I always kept my goal in mind, which was to complete my degree, engineering degree, and to make my parents proud. I never wanted to be a burden to the family. In fact, I wanted to help. And I knew the economic situation in the country was not going to improve anytime soon. So my best bet was to study abroad and gain the knowledge and skills necessary to be a productive member of society.
I mean, that's subjective, right? Yes. But I'm sure your parents are very proud of you. And you started from college. Where did you go from there? What has been your career journey?
After bachelor's degree, I took 1 year off. Actually, I went back home, took a little break from school and from the stress. And then after a year, I went back and I started a master's degree in engineering once again.
And what was your first role outside of college?
It's been many years, but my first role was actually in the defense industry. I worked in the design, requirements, and integration of military software for spy aircrafts and ships. So that was a very exciting world, but completely different from the commercial sector.
It sounds it. That's what I love about this conversation is we're going to be talking more about those changes and what made you decide to change, what kind of spurred that initiative, and kind of asking yourself those questions. And I think a lot of our listeners sometimes find themselves in those moments in their careers where they're deciding, do I stay? Do I go? I think that's a song, actually. So Kyra, I know the role you'd mentioned, it's definitely not the one that you had when you first left college, and certainly did not fulfill your dreams of designing roller coasters, which, you never know. That might be coming up in the future. But it sounds like you really took some initiative and asked yourself, what do I really want in my career? Can you share kind of more about how that curiosity-driven mindset influences your work today, how it influences your change in careers?
Absolutely. I will say changing companies is difficult. I think it always will be difficult, and it's a hard choice. And I think one of the biggest things that drove me to that choice was not only making sure that I was making the right choices, like personally, making sure that my family was taken care of and that I was making the choices there that would best protect that, but also what would be best for me personally. And the driving forces in my life is the desire to constantly be challenged. I found when you're being challenged, you're being forced to learn, and then you're just naturally becoming a better engineer. If you're not getting opportunities to interact with new projects and problems and new design constraints, you're not being pushed and you're not growing. So at my previous role, I started running into projects that I was basically just making the same design, just scaled up, scaled down. And the design constraints weren't changing, the challenges weren't changing. And I just was kind of starting to operate on autopilot. And I wanted to find an environment that would give me new growth opportunities, new problems that I haven't ever thought about solving and didn't know how to solve. And at Resideo, that's exactly what I'm able to do. I'm now having to think about design factors I didn't have with industrial machines, like much larger yearly quantities, being so much more sensitive to price, and the speed of the project is faster. Instead of a 2, 3, 4 year project, it might be a year, it might be 8 months, which makes designing significantly more challenging. And then I guess to summarize, the biggest motives in changing careers and making that jump is making sure that I am getting the opportunities to put myself in a position where I'm not completely comfortable. When I start finding myself completely comfortable in my day-to-day work, I know that I need to find something more challenging to continue pushing myself to become a stronger engineer.
That's really great advice for just life in general, right? To lean into that discomfort and to the change, but especially important for engineers with their work because it is such a dynamic industry. So if you're afraid of change, that could be a bit of a a challenge for you in the engineering field, would you say?
Yeah, I think you put it nicely. Lean into the discomfort. In the discomfort is where you're going to learn the most about yourself, about what you're capable of, and honestly, when you might find some of your best ideas to solving problems creatively.
Absolutely. That's wonderful that you found a place like Resideo that really nurtures that for you. And how long have you been with Resideo now?
I have been with Resideo about 9 months.
Nice. Okay. So still a bit of a honeymoon period.
We're getting to the end of the drinking from the fire hose phase, is what I like to call it. So starting out, lots of new information, lots of new products, different manufacturing processes that I was not completely aware of. Our internal manufacturing processes are just internal design processes that I had to quickly jump on board and understand so that I could start getting to some of the actual day-to-day engineering work. So starting to approach the end of that where I'm starting to feel a lot more effective in my day-to-day work. But there's definitely several months of that. The onboarding doesn't end after you finish your HR modules. There's continual learning for about, I'd say, the first year, and then it starts to ease out.
What an exciting time, though. And especially when you have a company that's really supporting that and you're onboarding, especially and making sure that you have everything you need to do your best work.
Yes, it's been extremely supportive in the onboarding process here, making sure that I have the access to the technologies and individuals I need in order to become an effective employee.
Yeah. I think it's sometimes it's overlooked how important a solid onboarding of just with anything, a new employee, new members for an organization, what have you. That time period is so critical that they're so thoughtful around that makes a huge difference in how you're starting off with the company and how you're feeling and kind of sets you up for your success, really. So, Helen, do you remember a similar time in your career where you just you knew there was a pivotal moment and you had to ask yourself a question and what did that conversation with yourself sound like? Or maybe you had a conversation with others, but what did that conversation sound like?
I do recall a pivotal moment in my career was when I transitioned from the defense industry after working in that industry for more than a decade into the commercial sector. That was a huge change that ultimately led me to Resideo. I went from working on projects with the US government, military personnel that lasted 10, 20 years to the fast-paced world, agile, if you may say, here at Resideo. And now I work with teams across the globe, and we do system integration for comfort products that support the safety, security, and comfort of users. And let me just say that I'm very proud of my team, and I think they're a fantastic bunch. So I'm glad I made this move.
Were you also over teams in your government work, or was this the first time you really moved into a leadership position?
I started first by being a member of a team. My first 5 years were not as a lead. Then I grew into that role with time.
That sounds great. So Currently in your career, as you mentioned, you're leading teams across time zones and cultures. What has that taught you about collaboration? And what advice do you have for engineers who want to grow into? You mentioned that you grew into your leadership position. What would you have advice to share with them if they're looking to grow into leadership positions as well?
Working with teams around the world, right? I'm fortunate to say that I've worked with folks from Asia, from Europe, from India, and all over the US. And the very first crucial thing that comes to mind is open communication, collaboration, being proactive with one another, keeping those lines of communication open and being transparent about the work and about the blockers and issues that one could find along the way. Another point is to be aware of cultural differences, to be curious about, for example, religious holidays, regional holidays, very aware of time zones, and that would help you to be more flexible in your day to day, and also to get better understanding of the working styles of your team. As a leader, it's very important that one learns how people communicate and how people work better with one another.
Sure, it's not a one size fits all.
Nope, not at all. As far as advice for engineers who want to grow into leadership roles, this is my personal opinion, and I believe that if you want to be a leader, you first need to be of service. Be of service to the folks from your own team. Offer your time and effort in the tasks that are needed. Help others by answering questions. It could be something simple, by answering a question, for example, or it could be troubleshooting a problem. But take from your time to help others from your team and from other teams. Another point is to treat everyone with respect. Uphold your personal values, such as integrity, dignity, compassion, empathy, and apply those values to your work environment. And one thing which is important to me is that the organization that you choose to work with mirrors the values that you also believe in.
That is fantastic advice. Somebody needs to rewind that part and play it again. I think it's worth it. I think it sounds like you lead with a lot of empathy and support and kind of taking that service mindset to how you are able to manage and get the best out of your team.
Yes, and I learned that from a very special person from my previous experiences. She was a fantastic lead because she did two things. She was always sure to give credit where it was due, not only personally one-on-one, but also to the rest of the organization. She was happy to speak in great terms about her own team, making us look good for the work we did. And also, she was there with us when we worked overtime hours. She was not only directing us to do the work, but she showed up and she had our back. I find her attitude and behavior very inspiring. So, as a role model, I try to do the same for my team.
That's a fantastic story. It helps when you have somebody like that that really impresses. It's a moment in your career that just makes such a big difference in how you show up going forward. Kyra, do you remember somebody in your career thus far that's made an impact on you to where you're like, I remember this. I remember those lessons from this person or how this person moved about in the world, and that's something that I take with me.
I've been pretty lucky to interact with a couple individuals. As an entry level engineer, you kind of go in on your first day and your first big kid job, and you're just looking around at all these people. And sometimes you meet these just brilliant, creative individuals. And I had one of these people in my last company, and I just kind of remember trying to be on any projects, any subsystem designs. If he was on there, I wanted to be there too, because I decided pretty early on. I'm like, I want to be him when I grow up. I want to see how. I want to be there when he's working through his problems. I want to stop and ask him questions on how he came to those conclusions. and try and absorb some of that so that someday I could maybe be a fraction as effective and brilliant as this person was. And he was a really good sport. He was always available to answer questions or sit down and walk me through designs, maybe areas I was missing, areas I should investigate more, give me direction on people I should go talk to or studies I should go look for to try and make sure I had a fully well-rounded solution if I was presenting something. So being able to interact with those people, and I think most people will come across one or two people in their career that that leave that impact. But I do feel that individual in particular has really shaped how I approach engineering. He had a very robust, very thorough way of looking at problems. And I do to this day try and take some of the tools I've learned for him and apply them to my current projects.
To your point, if you can find one person just like that, it's kind of like if you can find one true friend, if you can find one true mentor or coach or however you want to label that person that can really make a real difference and bring about some change in you to make you an even better person. I think that's just a beautiful thing when you can find that, and it's something to be very grateful for. And it's great to have those people, especially in the work that you all do, because many people joke on their jobs. At times they'll be like, "Oh, it's fine, we're not saving lives." But at Resideo Technologies, the products make a real difference in people's homes, whether it's comfort, safety, air quality, and other factors. So what is it like to apply your engineering skills to these technologies that really affect how people live every day? Helen, let's start with you.
Yes, Larry, I agree with you. System test engineering skills are crucial in ensuring that safety critical systems work reliably. We are system integrators. Our main goal is to pinpoint all those gaps between requirements, design, implementation, and identify potential failures before the products get to the market. In doing that, we have the customer in mind, our first priority. Part of our daily tasks, as system testers, we develop rigorous test scenarios and we attempt to validate the system under various conditions. So, for example, for thermostats or water leak detectors, we need to make sure that we test those devices so that when an emergency situation arises, the user is notified and he has the opportunity to take immediate action to protect their loved ones and to safeguard their property. So, in that sense, system engineering skills are highly demanding. We need to have a critical mindset, also perseverance, patience, to make sure these technologies work effectively, safe, and are reliable.
Absolutely. I mean, anytime you're talking about safety technologies, that's everything. You hope that people just like you are working on these types of things from what you're sharing.
Yes, people might say, well, it's just a thermostat or it's just a sensor. But for me, I take it very seriously because I think about everyday folks. They might have a pet at home or an elderly parent at home, and they want to make sure their home is protected when they are away. So they put their trust in us, in Resideo, to make sure that their loved ones are comfortable, that if there's an emergency situation, the system, the mobile application is going to send them a notification, is going to provide them with an alarm so that they can ensure safety on their end and take the precautions necessary. That's what I think about. And I think it's really, really important as a system integrator to have that challenge and also that rewarding situation when we accomplish our tasks.
Absolutely. And for the consumers on the other end, I mean, there is a peace of mind that you mentioned, right? That comes from something that we may be taking for granted, like a thermostat. That peace of mind is kind of invaluable.
Absolutely.
And Kyra, with you, and what's it like for you working on these home comfort products?
to kind of play off of what Helen said. In many cases, I think it's human nature to trivialize a solution. When I joined Resideo, I didn't realize how much engineering went into the comfort products that we have in our homes. You can look at a thermostat and you just see a thermostat, or a dehumidifier, you see a dehumidifier. You don't see all of the careful thought and engineering that went into it. A dehumidifier is basically an AC unit that has been scaled down and stuffed into a very small box. And then that box is often placed in attics that can reach up to 150 degrees, which is hotter than the hottest day in Texas. That same unit could also see temperatures on the other side of the spectrum near freezing. And these environmental conditions can affect the efficiency of that unit. And it's my job to make designs that can accommodate those extremes while still providing performance. And I think that's what makes some of these products so interesting is the science behind them. In the past year, I've discovered a branch of science called psychometrics, which focuses on the air vapor composition and the thermal behaviors thereof. And using psychometric calculations, I'm able to make informed design choices for indoor air quality products, like a dehumidifier, to make sure they operate effectively and efficiently. And what makes this work so meaningful is knowing that these products that I design someday are going to end up in somebody's home. They might even end up in my home. I do have a few of our products in my house. And I want to make sure that these products that I'm working on are robust, the design decisions are backed by data, and it's going to result in a product that I would personally trust installing into my house just as much as a customer's.
That makes all the sense, especially what's interesting about the products you're working on as well. Like you said, it's very personal, right? It's going into someone's house. Was that ever something that was part of your thought process when you were thinking about career choices? Or was it that you were looking for some interesting, challenging work? And when you came to Resideo, you realized after the fact, like, wow, I'm really working on stuff that's, you fall in love with the work and then you realize the impact perhaps a little later, and that's something that made a difference for you.
So the answer to that question is I think for me, it's always been about the engineering. I love puzzles. I love problem solving. I love the creativity of engineering, and I actually kind of like the process behind it too. All of the paperwork and documentation. So that's kind of where it started, and just happy coincidence that my career has morphed into products that I get to use. The first time I've worked on products that I can design and then also get to have at my home. The last products I had were, very expensive industrial machines. They don't fit in my living room, nor could I afford to have one in my
No.
living room. But this, I can walk into my living room and see the thermostat that I worked on right there on the wall. And I can go to Christmas dinner at my parents' house and see that they have the thermostat on their wall, and they can talk about how awesome it's been using it since they've switched from their previous one. So there is a very rewarding aspect getting to work on products I can interact with outside of work.
That sounds like a special type of rewarding work. Helen, what would you say around that? Of course, you were in government kind of defense work, so that does actually have an impact on people's everyday lives, not necessarily directly, but it is there. When you move into something like Resideo, was that something that was at the forefront that you wanted to work for a company that would make an impact in people's everyday lives? Or was it that this is rewarding and exciting work?
First, as an engineer, what I love is the challenge. I thought about what can I learn to apply my skills. After 6 years of engineering school, I wanted to be hands-on. So Residio is providing that challenge to me now in the multiple projects that I lead, and not only in the technical areas, but also working with other teams, learning their styles of working. And I am extremely proud to be working for Resideo.
I'm sure they're very proud to have you, especially after a very long career with them so far. So, and I'm sure many more years ahead. This has been such an incredible conversation. Before we wrap up, for women and allies who are curious about where to build their careers, the shameless plug. Why is Resideo such a great place to be an engineer? I've heard a lot of really great things, but I want to hear from you. Kyra?
Yeah, one of my favorite things about working at Resideo, I have to say, is the people. I get to work with a super diverse team in terms of culture, education, location, work history, and many other demographics. These individuals bring unique perspectives to help identify stronger solutions for projects. And from a personal standpoint, being exposed to all these ways of thinking and approaching problems allows me to absorb new ideas and to grow as an engineer. And in addition to learning from my coworkers, I'm taking advantage of Resideo's tuition reimbursement program and currently pursuing a master's degree.
Nice.
Yeah, it is. It's really nice. I'm very excited about it. And I don't think it's an opportunity I would have been able to pursue without the assistance from Resideo. So, as someone who really likes to challenge myself and to grow, I found Resideo to be a fantastic environment that supports my growth, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, on so many levels, it sounds like. Helen, what about you?
Yes, I need to echo Kira's point on people. What makes a difference within an organization, it's the people. Every day, the work environment, the collaboration, the teamwork, knowing that we are aiming together to the same goal. That makes a huge difference to me. Building a rapport with the team, making sure we have clear communication, that is really what stands out at Resideo. Teams that I work with every day, that being from Europe or Texas or Golden Valley, Bangalore, all of them have specific skills, and I learn something from them every day. Another point that I wanted to make is the employee resource groups here at Resideo, groups that I have supported and collaborated with in the past. Like, I'm happy to say Women at Resideo is a fantastic group, and you can join those groups and find solidarity, collaboration, and support. There's others too, like veterans, disabilities, Latinos at Resideo. So that's another way to expand on your network once you are with us here at Resideo. I'm so happy to hear that Kyra is pursuing her master's degree. That's awesome. Kudos, Kyra. Along those lines, Resideo also offers other courses here. And I'm not talking about the mandatory, like, security compliance courses. Modern, exciting, call me geeky classes like AI bootcamp engineering class, in prompt engineering class, AI related. And there's many others on cybersecurity, like how to be an ethical hacker, cloud computing, languages. So there's always room for those who want to grow professionally.
Absolutely. I mean, that's fantastic. It sounds very well thought out and very comprehensive, the support and the growth opportunities for employees there. And, you're talking about community and with the ERGs and mentorship and those types of things. And of course, you're talking Sweeze language there, right? We're all about that. The ERGs sound very much like our affinity groups that we have that cover everything from around just shared experiences, right? So it could be anything from cultural to areas in engineering to what have you. We offer it, of course, through us, but then to have it also in the immediacy of your own company is very important and pretty powerful as well. Thank you both. This has been so interesting, and I'm just fascinated by all the different types of engineering and how, as I believe Kyra had mentioned, how engineering really is everywhere. And it's interesting to hear that even from an engineering perspective, that you're also can be surprised in the level of engineering that you find in everyday technologies. And it's just been fascinating to hear your journeys, and most importantly, hear your journeys within when you joined Resideo, because it seemed like a wonderful turning point in your careers for the very much in the positive direction and growth, and made it so much more rewarding, it sounds like, in where you are today. For anyone listening who's feeling inspired by Helen and Kyra's stories and wants to explore careers at Resideo Technologies, you can visit resideo.com. That's RESIDEO.com, where you can find their careers page with more information, as well as the latest job opportunities. I'm Larry Guthrie, and from all of us at SWE, thanks for listening.